Karoline Leavitt was not your average lawyer. From the moment she stepped into the world of law, people noticed something different about her. She wasn't just smart. She had a fire inside her that made her impossible to ignore. Her journey began in a small town where dreams often stayed locked away because opportunities rarely knocked. But Karoline wasn't one to wait for opportunity. She chased it down with everything she had. After earning top grades in school and working multiple jobs to pay for college, she finally landed herself a spot at one of the best law schools in the country. Her professors quickly realized they had someone special on their hands. While other students were content learning from textbooks, Karoline wanted more. She spent hours poring over real-life cases, studying how lawyers won or lost their battles in court. It wasn't enough for her to know the rules of the game. She wanted to understand the players, the strategies, and the stakes. By the time she graduated, she was ready to take on the world. But life as a prosecutor wasn't easy. The legal system could be brutal, especially for someone like Karoline who refused to play dirty or cut corners. Early in her career, she faced countless challenges. Some colleagues dismissed her ideas, thinking she was too young or inexperienced. Others underestimated her abilities simply because she was polite and soft-spoken. Yet, beneath that calm exterior lay a fierce determination that no one could break. When given difficult cases, ones others avoided like the plague, Karoline dove in headfirst. She didn't care if the odds were stacked against her. What mattered most was doing what was right. It wasn't long before Karoline started making waves. One of her first big victories came when she successfully prosecuted a corrupt city official who had been embezzling public funds for years. No one thought she'd win, not even some of her closest friends, but Karoline proved them wrong. She gathered evidence meticulously, interviewed witnesses tirelessly, and presented her case so convincingly that the jury couldn't help but side with her. That win put her on the map, earning her respect from peers and admiration from the public. Word spread fast about the young prosecutor who wouldn't back down, no matter how powerful the opponent. Soon, Karoline found herself handling bigger and more complex cases. Each victory added another layer to her reputation, solidifying her status as a rising star in the legal field. People began calling her the Unstoppable Force, a nickname she laughed off but secretly loved. For Karoline, every case was personal. Whether it involved exposing corporate fraud, fighting for victims of crime, or holding government officials accountable, she poured her heart and soul into her work. To her, justice wasn't just a job, it was a calling. Then came the case that would change everything. It started innocently enough, with whispers of corruption swirling around certain high-ranking members of the local government. At first, the allegations seemed vague, almost too unbelievable to pursue. But Karoline's instincts told her there was truth buried beneath the rumors. So, she dug deeper, sifting through mountains of documents and following leads that took her down dark and dangerous paths. What she uncovered shocked even her. A web of deceit involving kickbacks, bribes, and illegal deals stretching across the city. As Karoline prepared to bring these findings to court, she knew this case would be unlike anything she'd ever faced. The defendants weren't ordinary criminals. They were influential figures with deep pockets and connections everywhere. They had armies of expensive lawyers, lobbyists, and PR teams ready to defend them at all costs. And then there was Judge Howard Grayson, the man assigned to oversee the trial. On paper, Grayson was a pillar of integrity, a respected jurist known for his sharp mind and fair rulings. But behind closed doors, he was something else entirely, a puppet master pulling strings for those willing to pay his price. Grayson's involvement in shady dealings had been an open secret for years, though no one dared speak up. He operated carefully, covering his tracks and ensuring his actions remained hidden. But now, with Karoline hot on the trail, cracks in his armor began to show. She discovered emails linking Grayson to key players in the scandal, along with financial records showing suspicious transactions tied to his accounts. Armed with this evidence, Karoline knew she had a shot at bringing him down. Still, the thought of going up against such a powerful figure filled her with both excitement and dread. The morning of the trial arrived, and tension hung thick in the air. Reporters crowded outside the courthouse, cameras flashing as lawyers, defendants, and spectators filed in. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Everyone knew this wasn't just another case. It was a battle for accountability, for truth, and for the soul of the justice system itself. As Karoline walked toward her seat, she felt eyes burning into her from every direction. Some looked at her with admiration, while others glared with thinly veiled hostility. She ignored them all, focusing instead on the task ahead. Judge Grayson entered the room moments later, his robes flowing dramatically behind him. He scanned the crowd with a practiced gaze, exuding authority and confidence. To the untrained eye, he appeared every bit the impartial arbiter of justice. But Karoline saw through the facade. Beneath the polished exterior lay a man desperate to protect himself and his secrets. As he took his place behind the bench, their eyes met briefly. In that fleeting moment, Karoline sensed the storm brewing between them. She didn't know exactly how things would unfold, but one thing was certain. This trial would leave its mark on everyone involved. What happened next would become the stuff of legends, a story told and retold for years to come. For Karoline, it was more than just another day in court. It was a test of her resolve, her ethics, and her belief in justice. And for Judge Grayson, it marked the beginning of the end. When the courtroom reconvened after the brief recess, the atmosphere was electric. The air felt heavier, charged with anticipation and uncertainty. Spectators filed back in, their faces alight with curiosity and speculation. Reporters clutched notepads and recording devices, eager to capture every detail of what might unfold next. Karoline Leavitt returned to her position at the podium, her expression calm but resolute. She carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew she was on the right side of justice, even if the path ahead remained unpredictable. Judge Howard Grayson, however, looked like a man teetering on the edge of collapse. His usual authoritative demeanor had evaporated, replaced by an aura of unease and vulnerability. Gone was the commanding figure who once presided over courtrooms with an iron fist. In his place sat a man visibly shaken by the consequences of his actions. As he adjusted his robe and cleared his throat, attempting to regain some semblance of composure, it was clear that the cracks in his carefully constructed facade were widening with each passing moment. Before proceedings could resume, two uniformed officers entered the courtroom, their presence immediately drawing attention. They moved with purpose, their footsteps echoing softly against the marble floor as they approached the bench. Whispers rippled through the gallery as people craned their necks to see what was happening. Grayson's eyes widened slightly when he noticed them, his fingers tightening around the gavel as though clinging to the last vestiges of control. "Your Honor," one of the officers said firmly, addressing Grayson directly. "We need you to step down from the bench." The words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. For a split second, there was complete silence. No shuffling papers, no murmured conversations, just the collective intake of breath from everyone present. Grayson blinked rapidly, his face flushing red again, this time not from rage but from humiliation. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his voice trembling. He glanced around the room, perhaps hoping for support or intervention, but found none. Karoline stood silently, watching the scene unfold with a neutral expression. Even the defendants seemed too stunned to react, their earlier bravado replaced by wide-eyed disbelief. The officer continued, his tone unwavering. "We have received credible information regarding your conduct and potential involvement in illegal activities. You are being placed under arrest pending further investigation." With those words, the reality of the situation hit Grayson like a tidal wave. His shoulders slumped and his hands fell limply to his sides. For a man who had spent decades wielding power and authority, the sight of him now, broken and powerless, was almost surreal. As the officers stepped closer to escort him away, Grayson protested weakly, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is absurd. I've done nothing wrong." But his words lacked conviction, drowned out by the weight of the evidence stacked against him. Within moments, handcuffs clicked into place around his wrists, eliciting gasps from the spectators. Cameras flashed furiously as the disgraced judge was led out of the courtroom, his head bowed in shame. It was a scene no one would soon forget, a stark reminder that no one, regardless of their position, was above the law. Aftermath. A city reacts. News of Judge Grayson's arrest spread like wildfire, dominating headlines and igniting conversations across the nation. Social media platforms lit up with reactions ranging from outrage to celebration. Videos of his meltdown in court went viral, viewed millions of times within hours. Comment sections overflowed with messages praising Karoline Leavitt's courage and condemning Grayson's hypocrisy. Hashtags like Darshan Justice for All and Aish Karoline the Hero trended globally, turning the prosecutor into an overnight sensation. For many citizens, Grayson's downfall was both shocking and cathartic. Here was a man who had symbolized the integrity of the judicial system, yet behind closed doors, he had betrayed that trust in the worst possible way. His arrest wasn't just a personal reckoning, it was a wake-up call for institutions everywhere. People began demanding greater transparency and accountability, urging lawmakers to implement reforms that would prevent similar abuses of power in the future. But while the public celebrated Grayson's fall from grace, Karoline remained focused on the task at hand. For her, this wasn't about personal vindication or glory. It was about ensuring that justice prevailed. She returned to work the very next day, diving back into the case with renewed determination. Though Grayson's departure had shifted the spotlight, the trial itself was far from over. There were still defendants to prosecute, evidence to present, and victims to fight for. Her colleagues marveled at her ability to stay grounded despite the whirlwind surrounding her. "How do you keep going?" one of them asked during a rare break between sessions. Karoline smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the weight of everything she'd endured. "Because giving up isn't an option," she replied simply. "If we don't hold these people accountable, who will?" Redemption. Through resilience. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effects of Grayson's arrest became impossible to ignore. Law enforcement agencies launched investigations into his dealings, uncovering layers of corruption that extended far beyond the original case. Key figures implicated in the scandal, including several high-ranking officials, were arrested or forced to resign. Public trust in the government took a significant hit. But for the first time in years, there was also hope. Hope that the system could be fixed, that wrongs could be righted, and that justice could truly serve the people. Karoline played a pivotal role in keeping the momentum going. She worked tirelessly, collaborating with investigators and testifying before legislative committees to advocate for systemic changes. Her insights helped shape new policies aimed at increasing oversight and preventing conflicts of interest within the judiciary. She also spearheaded initiatives to mentor young lawyers, particularly women and minorities, encouraging them to pursue careers in public service. Despite the accolades pouring in, Karoline remained humble. "I didn't do this alone," she often reminded interviewers and well-wishers. "It takes a team to make real change happen." Her gratitude extended to everyone who had supported her along the way, from her colleagues and family to the brave whistleblowers who risked everything to expose the truth. Yet even as she basked in the glow of victory, Karoline understood that the fight was far from over. Corruption was a persistent foe, one that required constant vigilance and unwavering commitment to combat. But she welcomed the challenge, knowing that every small step forward brought society closer to fairness and equality. A new chapter begins. By the time the trial concluded, Karoline had cemented her place as a champion of justice. The jury delivered guilty verdicts for all remaining defendants, sending a powerful message that no one, not even the most influential individuals, could escape accountability. As the courtroom erupted in applause, Karoline allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She thought about the long nights, the sacrifices, and the obstacles she'd overcome to reach this point. And she thought about the countless others who had inspired her journey, the ordinary people whose voices had been silenced until now. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed her, eager for quotes and sound bites. Karoline addressed them briefly, thanking everyone who had contributed to the case's success. "Today isn't just about winning," she said, her voice steady and sincere. "It's about proving that justice can prevail, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Let this be a lesson to us all, that integrity matters, and that standing up for what's right is always worth it." As she walked away from the cameras and flashing lights, blending into the crowd, Karoline felt a sense of peace wash over her. The road ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges, but she was ready. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that real change was possible, and that she had played a part in making it happen. Little did she know, her story was only beginning. Across the country, people were inspired by her example, vowing to stand up against injustice wherever they saw it. In schools, community centers, and boardrooms, conversations sparked about how to build a better, fairer world. And at the heart of it all stood Karoline Leavitt, a beacon of hope, resilience, and unwavering determination. The courtroom was packed to the brim, with every seat occupied and even a few people standing along the walls. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks, cameras clicked quietly from the back, and whispers buzzed like bees among the spectators. Everyone could feel the weight of what was about to unfold. Karoline Leavitt stood at the podium, her posture straight but relaxed, exuding calmness that masked the whirlwind of emotions inside her. She had spent months preparing for this moment, countless late nights reviewing documents, rehearsing arguments, and strategizing how best to present her case. As she began speaking, her voice carried across the room with clarity and conviction. "Your Honor," she said, addressing Judge Howard Grayson directly, "the evidence we are presenting today will demonstrate beyond any doubt that corruption has infiltrated our local government." With each word, she laid out her case step by step, introducing documents, emails, bank statements, and recorded conversations that painted a damning picture of illegal activities involving several high-profile individuals, including, indirectly, Judge Grayson himself. Karoline's presentation was methodical, almost surgical in its precision. She started with smaller pieces of evidence, building a foundation before moving on to the bigger revelations. Each piece fit together like a puzzle, creating an undeniable narrative of greed and misconduct. The defendants shifted uncomfortably in their seats as they watched their carefully constructed defenses crumble under Karoline's relentless assault. Their lawyers whispered urgently to one another, trying to figure out ways to counter her points, but Karoline stayed 2 steps ahead, anticipating every objection and preemptively dismantling it. It wasn't long before the atmosphere in the courtroom grew tense. Judge Grayson, who had initially appeared composed, started showing signs of unease. His fingers drummed lightly against the edge of his bench, and his eyes darted between Karoline and the growing pile of evidence displayed on screens around the room. When Karoline introduced intercepted phone calls implicating him personally, the tension reached a breaking point. One recording in particular caught everyone's attention, a conversation where Grayson could clearly be heard discussing payments and favors with one of the defendants. The audio crackled slightly, but his voice was unmistakable. At first, Grayson tried to maintain his composure. He leaned forward slightly, squinting at the documents being shown, pretending to scrutinize them closely. But as Karoline continued, her tone firm yet respectful, he couldn't hide his growing agitation. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead, and his face flushed red. For someone used to wielding power and control, the situation must have felt unbearable. Here he was, exposed in front of a room full of people, his secrets unraveling before his very eyes. Then came the moment that changed everything. Karoline paused briefly, letting the gravity of the evidence sink in. "Your Honor," she said, turning toward Grayson once again, "this next document is particularly significant." She held up a printed email, its contents projected onto a large screen for everyone to see. It detailed a financial transaction linking Grayson to one of the key players in the scandal. The numbers were clear: the dates precise, and the implications impossible to ignore. That was when Grayson snapped. His gavel came crashing down onto the bench with such force that it startled everyone in the room. "Enough!" he bellowed, his voice booming through the courtroom. All eyes turned to him, shocked by the sudden outburst. Karoline froze mid-sentence, her hand still holding the document aloft. Even the defendants seemed taken aback, exchanging nervous glances as if unsure. What to do next, Grayson didn't stop there. Rising partially from his seat, he pointed a trembling finger at Karoline. "How dare you stand there and accuse me of wrongdoing?" he shouted, spittle flying from his mouth. His face twisted into a mask of fury, and veins bulged visibly on his neck. "You're nothing but a naive little girl playing dress-up in a courtroom. Do you think you can come here and destroy my reputation with your baseless accusations?" The room fell silent, save for the faint hum of the air conditioning overhead. No one moved, no one spoke. Spectators exchanged wide-eyed looks, unsure whether to believe what they were witnessing. Judges were supposed to remain impartial above reproach, yet here was Grayson losing all semblance of professionalism. His words echoed harshly, bouncing off the walls and hanging heavy in the air. Karoline blinked once, twice, processing what had just happened. For a brief moment she looked vulnerable, caught off guard by the sheer venom in Grayson's tone. But then something remarkable happened. Instead of shrinking back or allowing herself to be intimidated, she straightened her shoulders and met his gaze head-on. Her expression softened slightly, not out of weakness but out of quiet confidence. Slowly, deliberately, she lowered the document and placed it neatly on the podium. "Your Honor," she replied, her voice steady and measured, "I assure you, these accusations are far from baseless. They are supported by facts, evidence, and testimony. If my presentation has upset you, perhaps it is because the truth often does." Her response sent ripples through the courtroom. Some spectators nodded approvingly, impressed by her poise, under pressure. Others murmured among themselves, speculating about what might happen next. Even the security officers stationed near the doors exchanged uneasy glances, uncertain whether they should intervene. After all, judges typically commanded respect and authority. It wasn't every day you saw one lose control so publicly. But Grayson wasn't finished. Still fuming, he slammed his gavel again, though this time it felt more desperate than authoritative. "This is outrageous," he roared. "I won't tolerate being attacked in my own courtroom. You," he jabbed a finger at Karoline, "have overstepped your bounds. I demand an apology." "An apology?" The request sounded absurd, even laughable, given the circumstances. Karoline tilted her head slightly, studying him as if seeing him for the first time. Then, without raising her voice or betraying a hint of anger, she said simply, "With all due respect, Your Honor, your reaction speaks louder than any apology I could offer." Those words hung in the air, sharp and pointed, cutting through the chaos like a knife. Grayson opened his mouth to retort but stopped short, seemingly realizing that anything else he said would only dig him deeper into trouble. He sank back into his chair, breathing heavily, his face flushed with embarrassment and rage. For the first time in years, maybe even decades, he looked powerless. What followed was a surreal stretch of silence. The courtroom remained frozen, as if waiting for someone to make the next move. Reporters scribbled furiously, capturing every detail of the unprecedented scene unfolding before them. Defendants glanced nervously at their lawyers, while spectators whispered behind cupped hands. And Karoline? She stood tall, unshaken, as if she'd known all along that this moment would come. Unbeknownst to anyone at the time, those few minutes would mark a turning point, not just for the trial, but for the entire justice system. Outside the courtroom, phones buzzed with notifications as videos of Grayson's meltdown spread like wildfire online. Inside, the wheels of accountability were already beginning to turn. What started as a bold attempt to expose corruption had spiraled into something much bigger, a reckoning that would leave no stone unturned and no guilty party untouched. For now, though, the focus remained squarely on Judge Grayson and the woman who dared to challenge him. As the echoes of his outburst faded and reality set in, one thing became abundantly clear. Justice was watching, and it wasn't about to let anyone escape its grasp. As the courtroom buzzed with shock and disbelief following Judge Howard Grayson's explosive outburst, Karoline Leavitt remained calm. Her steady demeanor was a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding around her. While Grayson slumped back into his chair, visibly shaken and breathing heavily, she took a moment to collect herself. She knew that what had just happened wasn't just an embarrassing spectacle. It was evidence of something much bigger. A judge sworn to uphold justice had publicly revealed cracks in his own moral foundation, and Karoline understood instinctively that this was a turning point. She glanced at the gallery behind her, where reporters were furiously typing on their laptops or recording videos on their phones. The murmurs among the spectators grew louder as people whispered about what they'd just witnessed. Some looked outraged. Others seemed almost gleeful, as though they'd been waiting for someone like Grayson to slip up. Karoline didn't need to say anything more. His behavior spoke volumes. Still, she needed to act quickly. This wasn't just about exposing corruption anymore. It was about holding authority figures accountable when they abused their power. Without missing a beat, Karoline turned toward the bailiff standing nearby. "Your Honor," she said, addressing Grayson formally despite his earlier tirade, "I request a brief recess so that we may address the conduct displayed here today." Her voice carried no hint of anger or triumph, only professionalism and resolve. The tension in the room thickened further as all eyes shifted to Grayson, who now looked pale and disoriented. For a man accustomed to wielding control, he suddenly appeared lost, unsure of how to respond. Grayson hesitated, his fingers gripping the edge of the bench tightly. He opened his mouth as if to protest, but thought better of it. Instead, he nodded, curtly, and muttered, "Very well, we'll take a 10-minute recess." With that, he banged his gavel weakly, signaling the temporary halt of proceedings. As soon as the words left his lips, the courtroom erupted into a flurry of activity. Reporters rushed outside to file updates, while spectators debated animatedly, in hushed tones. Security officers exchanged wary glances, clearly uneasy about the situation escalating further. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Grayson, events were already spiraling beyond his control. Among the attendees that day was Marcus Reed, a seasoned investigative journalist known for his dogged pursuit of truth. Marcus had been covering the trial from the start, sensing its potential to expose deep-seated corruption within the legal system. When Grayson lost his temper and lashed out at Karoline, Marcus immediately recognized the significance of the moment. Without hesitation, he discreet merger. Months after the dramatic courtroom showdown, the ripples of Judge Howard Grayson's arrest continued to spread far and wide. What had started as a single case of exposing corruption had snowballed into a nationwide movement demanding accountability and transparency in the justice system. Karoline Leavitt found herself at the center of this wave of change, not because she sought the spotlight, but because her actions had sparked something bigger than anyone could have anticipated. The legal community was abuzz with discussions about reform. Judges, lawyers, and lawmakers gathered for conferences and panels to address the cracks in the system that cases like Grayson's had exposed. The phrase "accountability starts at the top" became a rallying cry, echoing through courtrooms, legislative halls, and even classrooms where future legal professionals were being trained. Many credited Karoline with igniting this push for change, though she humbly deflected the praise, insisting it was a collective effort. Reforms began taking shape slowly but surely. New oversight committees were established to monitor judicial conduct, ensuring that judges remained impartial and free from external influences. Transparency measures were introduced, requiring public disclosure of financial records and potential conflicts of interest for all high-ranking officials. Mentorship programs flourished, aiming to diversify the legal profession and empower underrepresented voices who might otherwise be shut out. These initiatives weren't perfect, and there was still much work to be done, but they marked an important step forward, a foundation upon which future generations could build. For Karoline, life didn't slow down after the trial ended. If anything, her schedule became even busier. Invitations poured in from universities, advocacy groups, and government bodies eager to hear her speak about ethics, perseverance, and the importance of standing up for what's right. She accepted some of these opportunities, traveling across the country to share her story and inspire others. Her speeches were never self-congratulatory. Instead, they focused on practical advice and encouragement. "Justice isn't just about winning cases," she often said. "It's about believing in fairness even when it feels like the world is against you." One particularly memorable event took place at a law school where Karoline had once dreamed of studying. Standing before a packed auditorium of students, she recounted the challenges she faced early in her career, the doubters, the setbacks, and the moments when giving up seemed easier than pushing forward. But she also spoke about the victories, no matter how small, and how each one fueled her determination to keep going. When she finished speaking, the room erupted in applause, and dozens of students lined up to thank her personally. For many, meeting Karoline wasn't just inspiring, it was life-changing. Meanwhile, Judge Grayson's story served as a cautionary tale. After pleading guilty to multiple charges, including bribery, misconduct, and abuse of power, he was sentenced to prison. His name became synonymous with hubris and corruption, a stark reminder of what happens when those in positions of authority lose sight of their responsibilities. Some argued that his punishment was too lenient given the scale of his crimes, while others believed it sent a strong enough message to deter similar behavior in the future. Regardless of opinions, one thing was clear: Grayson's legacy would forever be tainted by his choices. But perhaps the most profound impact of the case was felt outside the courtroom. Ordinary citizens, inspired by Karoline's courage, began speaking out against injustices in their own communities. From grassroots movements advocating for affordable housing to campaigns demanding better protections for workers' rights, people realized they had the power to create change. Social media played a crucial role in amplifying these efforts, connecting activists and supporters across vast distances. Hashtags like Try Stand with Karoline and Justice for All became symbols of unity, encouraging individuals to take action however they could. Karoline noticed this shift whenever she ventured into public spaces. Strangers approached her in grocery stores, coffee shops, and parks, sharing stories of how her example had motivated them to fight for causes close to their hearts. A young woman told her she had decided to pursue a career in law after hearing Karoline's speech online. A retired teacher revealed he had started volunteering at a local nonprofit dedicated to helping victims of corporate fraud. Each encounter reminded Karoline why she did what she did, not for fame or recognition, but to make the world a little fairer, a little kinder. Despite the accolades and admiration she received, Karoline remained grounded. She returned to her work with the same quiet dedication that had defined her throughout her career. Though offers came in for higher-paying jobs at prestigious firms, she declined them, choosing instead to stay in public service. "This is where I belong," she explained to a friend who questioned her decision. "I want to be part of the solution, not just another bystander." Her humility only endeared her further to the public. People admired not just her achievements, but her character, her willingness to listen, her empathy for others, and her refusal to let success go to her head. Reporters covering her story often noted how rare it was to find someone so accomplished yet so approachable. One journalist described her as the kind of person you'd want beside you in a storm, steady, compassionate, and unflinchingly honest. As time passed, Karoline's influence extended beyond the legal field. Schools began incorporating her story into curriculums, teaching students about integrity, resilience, and civic responsibility. Books were written about her journey, capturing both the triumphs and the struggles that shaped her path. Documentaries aired on television networks, shedding light on the broader implications of the case and celebrating the everyday heroes who contributed to its success. Even Hollywood expressed interest in adapting her story for the big screen, though Karoline politely declined, preferring to let the real-world impact speak for itself. Yet, amidst all the attention, Karoline never lost sight of what truly mattered. Every morning she woke up with the same goal she'd always had: to make a difference. Whether it was mentoring a young lawyer, testifying before Congress about proposed reforms, or simply listening to someone in need, she poured her energy into creating positive change. Her friends joked that she didn't know how to slow down, but deep down they admired her boundless passion. Looking back on everything that had transpired, Karoline couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the team that supported her, for the evidence that led to justice, and for the countless strangers who stood by her side. She knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth. There would still be battles to fight and obstacles to overcome, but she faced the future with hope and determination. One evening, as she sat on her porch watching the sunset, Karoline reflected on the journey that had brought her here. It hadn't been easy, and there were times when doubt crept in, but every challenge had taught her something valuable. Every victory had reinforced her belief in justice, and every setback had strengthened her resolve. As the sky turned shades of orange and pink, she smiled softly, knowing that her work was far from over. Justice, she thought, wasn't a destination. It was a lifelong commitment. And so, Karoline Leavitt continued forward, one step at a time, leaving behind a legacy of courage, compassion, and unwavering faith in the power of doing what's right.